Welcome to the Dr. Wyatt Show podcast, where developing a long-lasting, happy relationship is the status symbol to achieve, and following my 6 marriage steps is a path to help get you there. I'm your host, Dr. Wyatt Fisher, a licensed psychologist specializing in marriage counseling. Remember, you can contact me on the Dr. Wyatt Show Monday through Thursday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time with your marriage-related questions. You can reach me at 720-307-7347. Tell your family and friends about the podcast. Tell them the phone number. They can call me. It's free marriage advice. Quick announcement. Tomorrow I am doing the Total Marriage Refresh Conference in Denver, Colorado. It's the first time I've done it live in a year and a half. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. Some of you have already registered. If you're still interested in attending, you can go to my website, click on Marriage Retreats, look for the location for Denver, then you can register. I'm excited to work with everyone tomorrow to show you the top 6 steps to marriage satisfaction. The conference is 6 steps. That's a presentation. And then after each step, you have around 30 minutes to apply the content with your partner. During that time, I walk around, I intervene, I try to help couples with questions they may have. It's a packed day, but it's full of tools, full of information, full of application. So if your marriage could use a refresh, I highly encourage you to attend. If you can't make it tomorrow, again, go to my website under Marriage Retreat. You'll see all the different locations over the next month or two that you can attend. Today I'm going to talk about 4 times not to expect empathy from your partner. We all want empathy. When we're stressed, when we're venting, we want our partner to respond with empathy because empathy makes us feel cared for, makes us feel like they get it, makes us feel like they have our back. But sometimes we may have unrealistic expectations for when they should be providing empathy. If you're venting about anything that has nothing to do with them, that would be your job, maybe your kids, maybe something with your friends. If you're venting about those things, absolutely, your partner should respond with empathy. However, if you're venting about something about them, empathy becomes very tricky. So I'm going to go through 4 times you should not expect them to respond with empathy. So if you're complaining about them, you're making a complaint, or you're venting about them, and number 1 is you're not pointing out their progress, they're going to get defensive, not empathetic. So if you're making a complaint and you just go right for the complaint and you don't pause to comment on how they've gotten better, how they've improved, how they've actually tried harder, how they're more open to your feedback. If you don't start with those positives, they're going to get defensive and point out how they've gotten better. They're not going to be empathetic. They're going to point out their progress because you're not pointing out their progress. So that's one time you can't expect them to be empathetic, is if you go straight for the complaint instead of starting with their progress. You have to start with the progress. A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. When you want to make a complaint, you have to start with the progress first. If you don't expect them to be empathetic. Second time they're not going to be empathetic is if when you're venting and making a complaint about them, that you don't mention their background and you don't mention their circumstances. Their background refers to their past before they met you. A lot of times that's going to be their childhood. What did they go through growing up? Were they neglected? Did they feel insecure? Did they feel voiceless? What were their experiences, and how did those experiences influence their behavior toward you that you want to complain about? You have to connect the dots. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you need to ask them, what did you go through growing up that may have influenced you to behave in this way that's hurting me? Ask them that question if you don't know. And their circumstances. What kind of circumstances were they going through that may also have influenced them to behave in the way that hurt you? Maybe they were stressed at work. Maybe they had a lot going on that week because their brother was in town. Maybe other things were happening. You have to think about their circumstances. Maybe they were socially isolated because of COVID. What were their circumstances that may have influenced their hurtful behavior? If you don't comment on that, their past and their circumstances, guess what? they're not going to be empathetic in response to your complaint. They're going to get defensive and talk about their past, and they're going to talk about their circumstances because you're not doing that. So if you just go right into the complaint and you don't comment on their past or their circumstances that may have contributed to their behavior, they're going to get defensive, and that's what they're going to comment on. The third time you can't expect empathy from your partner if you're making a complaint to them is if you're not acknowledging your part in your past. What's your part? What did you do? What's been your pattern that's contributed to this behavior your partner is having that's hurting you? How have you contributed to them behaving that way? Maybe you've said certain things. Maybe you've done certain things. Maybe it's a lack of certain things you've done. Maybe it's a lack of what you've said. But most likely, you have done or said something that's contributed to the very behavior they have that's hurting you, that you're complaining about. So you have to comment on that. You have to acknowledge your part. The other thing you have to acknowledge is your past. What about their hurtful behavior is activating your past? What's going on for you with your past? Usually it's one of two things. Either you have a wound in your past before them that might be getting tapped into, or you may have a value in your past and their behavior is violating that value. So you have to acknowledge that as well, because when you acknowledge your past, that their behavior is tapping into something in your past, a wound or a value, that's acknowledging that it's not all their fault, that it's not all them, that you may have a sensitivity that you're bringing to the table around this topic. That's going to lower their defense shields. That's going to help them feel less attacked. So if you're not acknowledging those things, your part and your past, guess what? Don't expect them to be empathetic, because they're going to feel innocently accused. They're going to say in response, your part. They're going to probably highlight your past. So if you're not doing that, they're probably going to get defensive, and that's what they're going to talk about. The fourth time you can't expect your partner to be empathetic is when you vent and you make complaints if you're not avoiding you, always, and never. You is accusatory. So the moment the word you comes out of your mouth, your partner is going to feel criticized. They're going to get on the defense. They're not going to be empathetic. And if you're saying always, never, they're going to get defensive, not empathetic, because they're going to feel like you're making generalizations, and they're going to think to the exception when that was not the case, when that was not true. That's where their mind is going to go. It's not going to go toward your heart and what you're feeling. They're going to get defensive. Their walls are going to go up. So when you make that complaint, you have to take out the word you and take out all generalizations. Instead, speak to the pattern, what is making you feel, and what your core need is underneath the pattern. But if you go for that complaint and you're venting with you statements and always and never, don't expect your partner to be empathetic. Instead, they're going to get defensive. So those are the main 4 times not to expect your partner to be empathetic. If you're venting about them, to them, and you don't point out their progress, you don't point out their past and their circumstances, you don't point out your part in your past, and then you're making a complaint without avoiding you and always and never, don't expect your partner to become empathetic. They're going to get defensive. Their walls are going to go up. So if you haven't realized already, I'm explaining the complainer steps to the Reunite tool. The Reunite tool is a method I've developed to help couples work through conflicts. We need methods. We are not good at this stuff. The Reunite tool is a way to do it. If you haven't learned the Reunite tool, you can access it by Googling Reunite tool. You can go to my website and click on tools. There's a whole tool called the Reunite tool that you can purchase. It's $10, and that's me explaining it, demonstrating it through video so you can watch it over and over. You also can go to my website, click on Relationship Coach, and you can work with one of my relationship coaches who have expertise in all my tools, including the Reunite tool. But the complainer steps of the Reunite tool is exactly the opposite of everything I just went through. When you want to make a complaint, you start with how your partner has gotten better. And then second, you talk about how their past and their circumstances probably influenced their behavior. That's giving them benefit of the doubt. Third, you talk about your part, how you have probably contributed to their behavior and how your past is probably getting triggered, which is accentuating your reaction. It's probably exaggerating some of your reaction. You have a sensitivity perhaps. Then you make the complaint, avoiding you comments and avoiding always and never. So you speak to the pattern, you talk about how it's making you feel, and then you talk about the core need underneath the complaint. That's the complainer steps to the Reunite tool. The other section of the Reunite tool is the listener steps. That's where your partner needs to master. That's their side. So again, if you have to vent about life, we all want to vent and we all want empathy. And if you're venting about anything else, anything that has nothing to do with your partner does need to learn how to empathize. However, if you're venting and complaining about them, don't expect them to empathize unless you are following those complainer steps of the Reunite tool. Thank you for listening to the Dr. Wyatt Show podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to click the 5 stars and leave a review. For more marriage resources, go to my website, drwyattfisher.com. And remember, your marriage is alive. If you care for it, if you tend to it, if you nurture it, it will grow and it will bloom and survive. If you neglect it and deprive it, it will wilt and die. The choice is up to you. Take care.